Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, starring Stellan Skarsgård, Gabriel Mann, Clara Beller, and Billy Crawford, directed by Paul Schrader. Now, people have put this in between this first and then The Exorcist: The Beginning, which I did last week, as the second movie, but I decided to flip it around because this The Exorcist Beginning came out at 2004, where this thing came out in 2005. I think against Star Wars: Revenge of the Sith, but I've heard a little bit about this movie and how this is a better movie than the Rennie Harlan one. So let's see if that remains true. Let's just get into this movie. We start the movie in Holland in the year 1944, where they're in the middle of a war with the as a German lieutenant and asks Father Lancaster Marin, returned by Stellan Skarsgård, who is responsible for messing with the Germans, and the German lieutenant shoots a few people for no good reason, as he almost shoots a kid and almost kills all of the civilians, and 3 men get killed because Father Marin makes the German lieutenant do so. And I guess this is why Father Marin was a priest, and I say was instead of is in the Rennie Harlan version, which I guess makes sense in British East Africa. In the year 1947, Father Francis, played by Gabriel Mann, who I know this guy from Josie and the Pussycats, Pussycats, surprisingly. Not the cartoon, but the movie version, talking with Father Marin about going on a mission with him, and Marin says no at first, but he reluctantly goes with him, and this is a much better version of the story than Rennie Harlan's version, as that was a terrible film like I brought up last week. Fathers Marin and Francis arrive to their location, where they meet Imekwe, as well as his 2 sons Joseph and James, and a doctor named Rachel Lesno, played by Clara Beller, whom I reviewed in Steven Spielberg's AI at one point, as Marin and Francis go out digging in the dirt with fossils, and this beginning is pretty good to watch. One man who was a digger passes out for overheating, and they suddenly see a woman whom I believe is crippled, and she suddenly disappears. And how the fuck did she disappear quickly while she was crippled? Which kind of bothered me, and the editing was a bit choppy at times. They continue digging, and as they're done for the day, Marion hears a dog, but it turns out it was a bad-looking CGI hyenas, bunch of hyenas, I'll say, which looked very cartoony, as I don't like these characters, but they're not as hateful as the Rennie Harlan film, but I just didn't care for these characters as much as I wanted to, as Marin and Rachel are not charismatic, as they don't have it in the movie. And is this movie scary? Not by a long shot. And they do try to make it scary, it just isn't successful. Rachel cures Shay Shay, played by Billy Crawford, whom I've not heard of, while Fathers Marin and Francis go in a cave. I do like the look of this movie better than the Rennie Harlan film, I'll say that much. Shay Shay feels the presence of evil after Fathers Marin and Francis go in a cave and unleash some kind of evil and have a look around, and they leave the cave, and we see some bulls eating some hyenas, and the CGI in that scene looks pretty bad, like the hyenas themselves. We get the same scene as in the Rennie Harlan film, where a woman gives birth to a child with maggots on the baby, and again, I found this scene very fucking disturbing. While Marion and Francis and Rachel do some kind of surgery, which was also disturbing, while a colonel is hanged upside down like a cross with a couple of heads chopped off. And I hate these scenes combined, and I'm just getting bored at around 45 minutes into the movie, as nothing is really happening. Marin visits Rachel and sees how Shay Shay is doing, as he's shocked but kind of better, and he's healing quicker than usual after surgery, which is a little odd until an attack happens, and they bring trigger-happy soldiers coming in with some villagers led by Major Granville, and he shoots a kid, and Marin punches him to the ground, and honestly, these scenes are pointless and means nothing to me. Marin wakes Francis up as he was asleep through the night, and speaks with Marin on a private method as Christians, and again, I was getting bored with this movie, as this is almost a 2-hour movie, and it felt a little bit too long for me. The children go to school of Jesus, and a terrorist shows up and shoots up the school full of children and keeps Father Francis alive, as well as Joseph, and kills the other children. And I can't believe this movie took that risk, but Rennie Harlan would have shown it, whereas this director didn't. But it was a terrible scene to begin with. Rachel and Father Francis see Shay moving his finger as he tries to give him hope from God, as he realizes once he put the cross on him, he's possessed by a demon. And the effects on the eyes looked awful. While Rachel gets Marion and Francis believing Shay must be baptized and have a conversation about how Francis is imagining the cross injury on Shay's head, and Shay awakens, and Francis asks if he wants to be a Christian, and he says yes, but in a church. And I just didn't believe him when he said that, as that scene didn't work for me. Father Francis and Rachel help Shay get in the holy water, and he faints, and he pushes Francis and Rachel back, telling the priest he warned him, while Marion hears music along with the soldiers from a village, and they're approached by some villagers. And Major Granville gets war from the villagers, and Francis approaches Marion, telling him he's possessed by Satan himself, and says, "I am perfection," while Major Granville is selfish enough by leaving the collapsed body or building buried until daytime, coming and then trying to get him out the hell out of there by next day. And Francis is hung on a tree and shot with arrows, and Marion gets him healed, but not Rachel, but a different doctor, as he says, "Please get the kid." And I'm not really going with the movie any further, as this isn't a horror movie. It feels like a drama with priests versus demons. Marion goes in the buried cave while Rachel is still inside, and I'm thinking now she's possessed, while she says she was dreaming and she wants to go back. And I just started to realizing I don't really care for this movie. Shay acts like the devil while Rachel leaves, and Marion talks with Satan while inside Shay, and he offers freedom as he prays for Francis to be alive so he can do the exorcism and not Marion all by himself as he prepares for it, and he gets there. And this is when I fell asleep the first time I saw the movie, because they basically bored me to death as he confronts Satan and performs the exorcism, and violent things happen, like pushing the priest while Marion throws holy water at Satan, and he moves around like while Marion is still performing the exorcism and remembers the events in Holland back in 1944, and he tries to do something different, but he can't do anything but die. And he wakes up from the vision and continues to exorcise the demon, and flies come out of his Shay's mouth, and becomes almost normal. It turns back into the devil and smacks it. And I don't remember Marion having a boiled face in the first Exorcist movie. And Rachel almost killed herself, and the demon in Shay has been I'll say. It makes people believe in God now, thanks to Marion's courage. And Francis ends up dead. Rachel and Shay say goodday to Marion, and he takes off on his own adventures. And the climax was better than Rennie Harlan's climax, but at the end of the day, I don't really care for this movie, unfortunately. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 4.4 out of 10. This is a better version of the story than the Rennie Harlan version, in my opinion. And the beginning was pretty good to watch, but by 45 minutes into the movie, I was getting bored with it, as the editing was a bit choppy. The CGI looked cartoony in a bad way, and the characters I don't really like, but they're not as hateful as the Rennie Harlan film. But I just didn't care for any of them, as Marion and Rachel have no charismatic with each other at the end of the day. The movie is not scary, not by a long shot. But this is a better looking movie than the Rennie Harlan film, in my opinion. But unfortunately, I don't care for this one either. So this is a mild non-recommendation for this version of the story, whereas the Rennie Harlan one made the worst one. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with The Exorcist Believer. And until then, I'm the devil. Now kindly get these chains off me.